What's up, Playground? It's me, Shanila, and welcome back to your Shadow Work series, where we're talking about the ins and outs of the inner shadows. For 22 episodes, we're talking about how to deal with the shadow work in your healing journey, how to integrate your shadows, and we're also giving practical information of how to approach your shadow work, your shadow healing from where it is that you are in your healing journey. So if you're not already subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and subscribe so you get a notification anytime a new episode of this series comes out. And let's get into episode 4. So friends, I was thinking about, what episode 4 was going to be about. And I actually wanted to talk to you about some of the common fears of shadow work. And also, as these words leave my mouth, I also wanted to say, this is not to scare you or to say you shouldn't do your healing because all these different things. I wanted to just have this serve as information, things that you can use as information as you're continuing your path on shadow work. And I'm pulling from my own experience. I'm also pulling from experiences of clients and mentees, trainers and trainees, and different things that I've experienced in life and my work in the healing arts over the last decade or so. So okay, fears of shadow work. I mean, do you have some that come to mind? Especially once you've understood what shadow work is, you know that this is the parts of you that you're probably ignoring, you're probably a little afraid to go into. So let me talk about 10 fears. And this is going to be a little bit more in depth of an episode. So having some tea, having a little cleaning work to do around the house is going to be nice, but let's get into it. So the first fear that I wanted to talk about in terms of shadow work is the fear of facing painful truths. Ain't that the truth, right? It is so common. And I see this with a lot of my clients who are committing to do the work. It's I'm not forcing people to come to do work with me around perfectionism and people pleasing. They're opting in and, choosing to work with me. But there's also this fear of facing painful truths. And people worry that they'll uncover memories and emotions or a part of them that they've suppressed for a reason. Okay. And so if you're not familiar with how memory can work, oftentimes memories can get suppressed when your nervous system and your energetic body believes that it's protecting you. So there might have been something that happened, whether it's big or small, whether it happened once or multiple times. It is possible just outside of the fact that, maybe you just forgot something. There's possibility that your nervous system actually suppresses you from being able to access a memory because it is too uncomfortable to experience. So your body just says, wow, if I remember that, then it's gonna fuck me up, or it's gonna really take me for a loop, or it's gonna change my worldview. And so it's a protective mechanism, a survival mechanism that many of us have that suppresses memory. And so I'm saying you could have memory loss for many different reasons and many different things, but suppressing memory is a common thing for people who experience a trauma or something really uncomfortable that needed protection at a young age. Okay. So this first fear that we're talking about, the fear of facing painful truths, is that a part of you might actually know that there's something that you're not really experiencing fully, or there is some kind of memory. Maybe you have some kind of intuition about it, or you have some kind of subconscious knowledge about it, but you just know that you don't want to go there. You know what I mean? There's just a part of you that says I am totally unwilling to relive the thing that I worked so hard to suppress, whether it was conscious or unconscious. Now, if you find yourself that you do have a fear of facing the painful truth, what I do want to emphasize for you is that while shadow work can bring up discomfort, your nervous system essentially doesn't allow you to experience things that you can't really deal with in the present moment. And as a healer, as somebody who's in the healing arts, who works with breath work and somatic work and energy sciences, I'm always somebody who's telling you that you heal at the pace of your nervous system. So when you're trying to do things too fast, too soon, you're kind of in this pathway of making yourself face things that your body necessarily cannot handle right now. Your physical somatic body, your physiology cannot really handle the information. So that's how we re-trigger ourselves. That's how we also, do too much healing too fast, too soon. That is a thing. And, you see all these let's go heal it. And it's very aggressive, there is a pace that is appropriate for every single individual. And you don't know what pace is right for you until you work with somebody who's like allowing you to see where your baselines are. So it is possible that you can uncover something that you're not ready for. And it's also possible that you become ready to uncover things that you thought you weren't ready for because you're preparing your nervous system to be able to handle the discomfort of that thing. So even if you don't know exactly what's going to come up, but you know that you're in a 6-week container with me, or you're in a 12-week container with me, and you know, like you're ready to like heal through whatever the hell is needing to be healed through, your nervous system starts to create safety within yourself. So your body starts to relax, and it says like, actually, we're not in the past right now. So it's okay for me to face this memory or face this thought. So maybe I'm not going to see 100% of this information, but I'm going to see the 10% that I'm able to handle right now. So oftentimes in somatic work and breath work, and, you know, especially in my line of work in breath work, and I teach a movement style breath work called flow breath work, which is all about energy sciences, moving the body and moving emotions and building emotional intelligence. A lot of the times your body will allow you to dissociate. So after that 10%, if your body said, I'm only ready to see that 10%, I'm not ready to see the 100%, your body's going to put you to sleep. It's going to take you out of the practice. It's going to bring you somewhere. It's going to make you look at your phone. It's going to make you open your eyes. It's going to make you do something that takes you out of that moment. It is actually good news. It's not that you're being lazy or you can't do it or you're not doing it right. It's really just you healing at the pace of your nervous system. So facing painful truths is true, but it is not necessarily something that your body cannot handle in the moment. Your body is training to be able to deal with the discomfort over time. All right. So take a nice deep breath, because if you are afraid to do shadow work because of this exact fear, I just want you to know that there are people that are going to not know that people has to heal at the pace of their nervous system, but then there's also qualified people who also know that you do heal at the pace of your nervous system. So it's very important to, you know, match yourself with communities and mentors who understand that, so that they're somewhere in the balance of, yes, pushing you to do the work, but then also meeting you exactly where you are so that you can explore and experience your growth edge too. Like, what does it mean for you to, you know, challenge yourself to go see some of these memories or some of these truths, while also holding compassion for yourself in the meantime on this discovery. Okay. So the second fear, let me think. Oh yeah. The second fear that you might experience when you're doing shadow work, whether you already started or you're going to start or you're kind of taking a break from it, is judgment. You know, there's shame, there's judgment, because man, you discover some ugly shit. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, sorry to say it that way, but it's like, yeah, you discover some like yucky parts of you, whether it's like directly you or, you know, something about your family or some like behavior of somebody in some place. There's some ugly parts, you know, and sometimes it's the ugly parts of your own self, right? It's something different when it's about other people, but when it's about yourself and you find that you're you know, you're the one who's toxic and you're the one who's inconsiderate and you're the one who's this and that, like when you realize that about yourself, like it feels really shitty. It sucks, you know what I mean? And that might bring up stories of feeling judgment or shame towards yourself. You feel unworthy, unlovable. There's all of these kind of thoughts that float around your mind. But here's what I want to say to you, which is that everybody has a shadow. Like, you ever see Peter Pan? You know what I mean? Like, everybody has a shadow, and it's part of being human. You know what I mean? It's like every single person is not perfect. There are so many imperfections that make us really adorable. You know, these are the things that make us cute. These are the things that make us human. This is the things that you love about your friends, that they're quirky and they're weird. And all of us have something that we're working with. So the shadow work is the compassion piece that you can have, and not judgment. It's like, if you were to not do your work because you don't want to be judged, then you're judging yourself. Like, you're prejudging yourself. So you're already judging yourself. So you might as well just do the healing work and continue to judge yourself than like not do any healing. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, you're trying to have it both ways, but you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to be judged, then at least bother doing some healing work in the meantime. You know what I mean? So there's there's the pros and cons of judgment and shame, because I do think that judgment and shame can be motivators to healing. Sometimes it's like when you feel shameful about yourself and kind of embarrassed, like the way that you behaved or the way that you respond or the way that you act or the way that you act out. It's like, aren't you ashamed about it anyway? You know what I mean? So like, why continue to behave this way and like embarrass yourself rather than just like go through the ew parts and like acknowledge that about you? That's the higher self version of you that says, cut it out. It's like so embarrassing. And you all have that friend, maybe it's you, but you all have that friend. We all have that friend who's like, why are you acting this way now? You know what I mean? You're in your big fucking age. Like, why are you out here acting this way? It's so embarrassing. When people are still acting from their childhood wounds, they're acting from their inner teenager wounds. They're responding in anger. They're responding in such a violent way, an emotionally chaotic way. It's like, really? You know what I mean? Like, that shit flew when we were 18. That was okay when we were, questionable 24. That's okay when we got into our 30s. But now, like, really, why are you doing that? So a little bit of judgment and shame, it's like, all right, use that for fuel to have some self-respect, to have a little bit of self-respect to get the work done. Like, show up for yourself. It's already shameful that you're doing it. I'm already judging you that you're like this at your big age right now. And then, you can choose to heal. Yeah. Okay. So number 3, because I got 10 to cover today. Number 3, which is the fear of losing identity. Did you ever feel this? Maybe you felt it, or you're kind of in this like navigation of that, but a common fear is losing your identity. And I noticed this so much with a lot of my clients, especially women clients, especially folks who are, early 30s and mid 30s. I often see people have this attachment to their identity. And this is true across all ages, but this is kind of like my hotspot of, who it is that I work with. And a lot of people have this like strong sense of self of like, this is who I am. This is my personality. I'm an overthinker. I'm a perfectionist. This is this. And they worry that integrating their shadows will actually make them have to change their identity for better or for worse, right? Because some of us have, a strong identity that make us, is helpful to us, right? There's pros and cons to having strength in your identity. One is that you have a sense of self. So you can identify as something and you love that label about yourself. It helps you think about yourself in a different way. You are, you feel empowered by this identity. And on another hand, you might feel completely limited by an identity that you hold. So it's not like, breaking an identity is a inherently good or bad thing, is that many people have an attachment to their identity. So if you're healing and you identified as a perfectionist for, 40 years of your life, all of a sudden you can't say that shit anymore, and if you're like, oh, I'm just an overthinker, and now you can't say that shit anymore because now you have tools to help you not do that. Or if you thought of like really nasty habits in your life were just personality traits, and all of a sudden you realize like, oh, you don't have to do this, you can change it, then it's like, oh, now you can't say it, you can't you hold on to that story anymore. There's a part of your identity that leaves because it disrupts your sense of self. And again, it's better or for worse because, like, what if you were fine and you didn't need to break down your identity, and then all of a sudden it's like disorienting. But oftentimes, especially when you're doing your shadow work, there's a lot of labels that people love about themselves. And I keep bringing up the same ones because, again, that is my line of work. Perfectionism, people pleasers, imposter syndrome, self-doubt folks. We have all of these people in the healing arts who want to share their gifts. They want to be the healers. They want to, support their clients to have transformation, but then all of a sudden they believe that they are fill in the blank. So they believe they are perfectionists, so they can't do this, or they can't do that because they're an overthinker, or they can't do this because they're an introvert. They can't do this because, right? Fill in the blank. And this fear of losing identity basically disrupts, as I mentioned, like it disrupts your sense of self. And I'll get into this in a couple of other fears that I'll cover today, but it also basically ruins your worldview. It's like, oh, I was really safe saying that I was a perfectionist, so I never really really had to complete any projects. Or I was saying that I'm an overthinker, so I never really had to have any self-responsibility or be responsible in any kind of fucking way, because I'm just like, oh, well, I'm just an overthinker, with your little privilege there, right? Ooh, triggered. I felt you, even though you're not here. So here's what I want to say about it, which is, shadow work doesn't erase who you are. It makes you more whole by integrating the parts of yourself that you're denying. It doesn't, change who you are. It shifts the way that you perceive yourself. So if you're perceiving yourself as I cannot, then that will manifest as your reality. And I am speaking to you in a world of privilege where me and you have the internet. We have a podcast to listen to. We have so many different resources that are privileged, right? Like there's so many different things that we have in the day to day, even if there's levels of oppression or levels of disprivilege that we experience. There's so much privilege just even being able to have this conversation with language, with, the resources that we have. So this changing of your identity is like shifting the perspective of what you have already in front of you. So if you're focused on the things that you're not, then you will always lack. You will always not have enough. Versus if you're shifting your identity to things that you are, that are great, that are malleable, that are adaptable, that are changeable, that are many other useful things, then you are going to focus on those things. Those things are going to get nurtured. Those things are going to get loved on. You're going to pour into those thoughts, behaviors, actions, concepts way more than other shit that doesn't matter, right? The parts of you that you're denying. So the fear of losing your identity, just like with any of the fears that we covered, is, there's all of these fearful things that come from fears, obviously. But there's also the opportunity for you to approach the fear from a different angle that says, I'm not actually losing an identity. I'm gaining a different perspective and gaining an identity that I can more so relate to and perhaps even attach myself to, that's going to be more helpful for me. So if I'm repeating something about myself over and over again, I'm only manifesting that to be true in my life. Even if that is a true, real challenge that I face, I'm not saying that you're making up your issues, but oftentimes our identities do create self-created obstacles. These are made up obstacles. They're like, well, you could not just do that, but you continue to. So that seems like a choice at a certain point. Once you have awareness of your issue, once you see it, perhaps you're a visual learner, once you see it drawn out on a piece of paper, when you see the pathway to changing your behavior, your thought, your patterns, but you still choose not to do that, then that's a you thing, right? Like there's a part of you that is wanting the shift of the identity. All right, so let's get on to fear number 4. So fear number 4, when it comes to shadow work, is the fear of being overwhelmed. And maybe you're already feeling that, like you're listening to a series of shadow work conversations, and even just this one episode is gonna be hella long. It's this fear of being overwhelmed. It's like, I'm gonna discover so much. There's the information, there's the unearthing of repressed emotions, memories. Like, how am I going to handle all of this stuff? There's so much to do, so much to think, so much to feel. And it's a lot, right? And there is a fear of overwhelmed. Now, I will go back to what I mentioned already about healing at the pace of your nervous system. Because shadow work doesn't have to be done all at once. Like, there's no race to that. And I mentioned at the beginning of the series, it's like, I'm talking to you about my past shadow work, but then also shadow work I'm in presently and things that I will be in the future. So it's like, I'm not done. You're not done. Nobody's done. You know what I mean? Like, things are going to continue to happen. And it's like, oh, there's another issue that I need to go heal now, or another thing. It's like, okay, that's like the inconvenience of human life, that things will always, be there to heal through. But what I was getting to was that shadow work doesn't have to be done all at one time. You are healing at the pace of your nervous system. So it is a gradual process, and it's okay to take it one step at a time. And something I mentioned to my clients and mentees, and especially students who come to become certified breathwork facilitators with me, is to take breaks. integration is a huge component of shadow work, and integration doesn't have to be with me. Sometimes I have clients who work with me for 6 weeks and they want to come work for another 6 weeks, and I say, hey, you gotta take a break. I'm losing money by saying that, to be honest, but there's this part of the integration that is so important, that is all about pacing yourself in your healing journey. And sometimes when we have such big breakthroughs and amazing moments and ahas, it's like you get addicted to the feelings, like, okay, Shanila, I want to do another round. It's like, I get it, but like, you and me both need a break right now. So that integration process is what helps you prevent that overwhelm. Is to say, we just did some really fucking intense work in 6 weeks, so why don't you take 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks off and just see how you can put what you learned into practice, so you're not uncovering more and more and more and more and more, right? It's like coursework. If you learn something and then you apply it, you're more likely to learn that thing and be able to sustain that learning than if you learn like 12 years of things in one day and then you're like, I learned nothing because that was just way too much information. So that's kind of the same thing with healing. It's like you take a little break, and these clients do so well because they're allowing that space to take place for them to chill, for their nervous system to create a different baseline. They're changing their responses, their actions, their behaviors, their mind, their neural pathway. All of these things are integrating and changing without us adding more. So the fear of overwhelmed is really about how and who it is that you're doing the work with. So if somebody's like rushing you and making promises and saying like, in 1 week, your shadow work is, you're going to be great. You're not going to have any daddy issues after this. It's like, okay, like that's just not true. It's just not going to happen. So you have to use your critical thinking skills. You have to use your discernment of how it is that you're doing shadow work, where it is that you're doing shadow work, who it is that you're doing shadow work with. All of these things are important, but you're not wrong to feel like you might be overwhelmed, like, oh, it's a lot. And also understanding that when you're doing shadow work in a structure, not like, oh, week 1, week 2, week 3, not like that, but your structure to understand that the person that you're working with and whoever it is that you're doing shadow work with understands that your nervous system is going to take time to stretch. It's going to take time to kind of just like settle into the new feelings, the new behaviors, thoughts, emotions, neural pathways. It takes time to settle into that. So it's totally okay to take it one step at a time. Now, let's get on to fear number 5. Fear of number 5. Ooh, this is a big one. And I talk to my clients so much about this. This is the fear of changing relationships. Okay. So have you ever felt that? Like if you were to heal, then like it would change things. Like it would change the way that you interact with people, especially friendships. It's going to change the dynamics. It's going to change, your relational expectations. There's so many different things that are going to change. And sometimes it's very micro and nuanced, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's very dramatic, because then people are like, what are you doing? Who are you? Like, you used to do this and now you don't do that, or you didn't used to do that. Now you, like, there is that like judgment, there's that judgment. But the fear of changing relationships is a real fear. So, what that means is like, it's going to shift a lot of the dynamics that you have with people around you. Again, relationships in whichever way or context you want to identify them, whether it's romantic or friendship or acquaintances or business, like you're not going to be the same person once you're doing shadow work. It's just not possible. And especially if you build relationships that are built on people pleasing or avoidance, and you built them on, over accommodating and letting people be inconsiderate to you, they're not going to understand like why they do not have access to you in the way that they used to. They're not going to understand like why they can't just like run over you like they used to, or say the things that they used to, or do the things or behave in the same. They're not going to understand that, unless of course they're also willing to do their shadow work at the same time. But oftentimes it's not, and we'll get to the loneliness piece of this at some point. But the fear of changing relationships is sometimes also losing relationships. It's not just changing them. Like the way that you interacted with these friends, or now it's different. Sometimes it's like you don't have these friends anymore because like you guys just don't vibe anymore. So the way to think about it in terms of truly stepping into your level of shadow work and the way that I know you want to is that understanding that some relationships may change, but the process allows for healthier relationships, better relationships, more authentic connections, just more aligned people in your life who are not like relying on you to have no boundaries or to be in a certain way or not have like any growth trajectory in their life, right? There's certain people in your life who have done that. Whether it has nothing to do with love. Like you might love them. Love has nothing to do with their mistreatment or their abusive behaviors or many other things that they might do that are unpleasant in your life. They're just inconvenient or whatever, right? There's so many things that happen from people we love that are not cool. So yes, relationships will change, and that's actually good news because your vibrational frequency is changing when you're doing shadow work. It's changing the way that your literal neural pathways, not just in your brain, because neural means like in your brain, like neuroscience, right? It's a head thing, but you also have pathways in your physical body. You have physiological pathways that are based in your nervous system that says, I'm not going to respond this way anymore. I'm not going to act this way anymore. I'm not driven into hyper arousal. I'm not shutting down all the time. I'm not feeling anxious. So your physical body is also building new pathways, if you will. Okay. So there's no way to necessarily draw like we can neural pathways in our brain, in our physical body. But if you were to think about new pathways being formed in the way that you're responding, the way that you're acting, the way that you're showing up, the way that you think of things in a emotional way, feel things in an emotional way, all of these things are allowing for more healthier connections, which I think is a great thing. So changing relationships, like, yeah, there is grief attached to that. There's sadness attached to that. There is judgment attached to it. There's, nostalgia, like some of these friends and some of these people you've just known for so long and had such deep connections with, but then it's like, you're just not vibing anymore. Your vibrational quality is different. When you don't vibe with somebody, literally you're vibrating at a different frequency. Frequencies are wavelengths, and you're just not on the same wavelength anymore. So all of this to say, it's like, good thing. You know what I mean? Relationships change, and sometimes it's for the better. So the next fear we have is the fear of not knowing where to start when it comes to shadow work. Now, have you felt this way before? You can let me know. Shadow work can feel really overwhelming, especially if you don't have the tools or the guidance. Because it's like, how do you know when you're supposed to start, right? Or where you're supposed to start, or which part of your shadow it is? Because everybody has a different pathway to their healing. Your pathway to liberation is so completely different than somebody else's. And the way that you're building self-mastery is so different than somebody else's, but there are very predictable steps that you do in order to do your shadow work. And if you're not necessarily in the communities that is allowing for a clear guidance, or you're not with a mentor or a coach or a therapist or whoever it is that you're working with in your, healing journey, if you're doing it kind of like guessing, you're doing guesswork, or you're throwing spaghetti at the wall, you're more likely to have this fear be validated, right? I was like, I don't know where to start because there's so many places, or there's so many, so many options, or if I do this or that, like, do I do this tool or that tool? There's a million different tools to do shadow work, but the truth of your starting point is allowing yourself to match with a container, a coach, a mentor, or therapist, whoever you're working with in the healing arts profession, that allow you to see you from where it is that you are and where it is that you want to go. Okay, that's point one. So if you don't know where you are at a baseline, and your coach or your mentor can't help you find that, you gotta fire them immediately. If they do not know how to get baselines of your nervous system, of your emotional state, of your physical state, of your mental state, of your psychosomatic states, you got to fire them immediately. Because shadow work is not a one-sided, one component thing. It is an integrative practice of so many different things that inform who it is that you are. So your emotions, your mental, your physical, your spiritual, your social, your energetic, all of these different things inform the way that it is that you're doing your work. So starting point is not necessarily just like, here's the blueprint and And if you downloaded any kind of bullshit like that, delete it off of your computer right now, because there's no such thing of like, here's where to start in your shadow work. What you do is you allow yourself to be perceived, to be seen, and you begin to allow your baselines to be measured. What happens when your baselines are measured is that you start to understand how fast you can go in your healing journey, how much time you are going to spend on certain things, and you're also allowing yourself to heal at the pace of your nervous system. So this thing that we keep saying, healing at the pace of your nervous system, healing at the pace of your nervous system, it is so true, because if you want sustainable results, if you want to have the healing actually stick and not just be information that you're collecting in books, you want to really apply it and embody it, your nervous system has to come with you. It has to agree that, yeah, this is what we're doing. We're changing these behaviors. We're losing this identity. We're shifting these relationships. We're, dealing with the overwhelm. We're leaving the judgment and the shame, or we're allowing the judgment and the shame to inform the way that we are dealing with the painful truths that we're facing nowadays. Right? All of this has to do with your nervous system. So the safety and the support is key when it comes to your healing. So if there's no spaces where you can co-create safety with the practitioner and you, if there are no places where you can feel like, you're really able to say the things that you want in terms of your lineage, your cultural context, your historical context, your, whatever other context you believe is important as part of your healing journey. If you're not really finding those containers, those are some of the things that you want to experiment with or explore as you are, perhaps dealing with the fear of not knowing where to start. All right. So fear number 7 is the fear of making things worse. Like, have you ever thought that? It's like, oh man, like why break it if it's not broke, or like why make it worse when it's already this bad? You know what I mean? So fear of making things worse is such a great fear, such a great and horrible fear, which is, it's really about, your concern about digging into your trauma, right? So you think like, yeah, I'm just jumping into this and I'm doing all this like random shit, which, point number 6 was not knowing where to start. Sometimes people do make things worse because they're doing random stuff and they're practicing with practitioners who are kind of just using them as guinea pigs. So if you don't have the proper support, you're going to find resistance. You're not really going to understand how to work through the resistance or be able to support yourself through the discomfort, or knowing what is your growth edge versus this is where I am and I can't go past this right now. There's a difference between that. So concerns about digging into your traumas is a great concern to have, because you should, be gentle and compassionate with yourself as you're doing any kind of healing work, any kind of shadow work, not doing too much, too fast, too soon, or doing things that are not really in alignment with, the goals or the visions that you have for yourself. There's so many things to consider in that pathway. So the fear of making things worse is you've got to clarify what you're doing right now. So if you're just being very general and vague about like, I'm doing shadow work, it's like, I don't know what the fuck that means. You know what I mean? Because it's like, what are you healing? Like what specifically are we talking about? So making things worse is when you're being vague, when you're not really, you're not really working with a practitioner or a facilitator and really doing a full consultation on understanding what your specific needs are. So that is about having the conversation with the facilitator, the practitioner, to say, hey, these are my goals. I don't actually know the language or the vocabulary for this, but this is essentially what I'm experiencing. Now, when you're working, I'll give you an example. For example, when you're working with me, right? A lot of people come to work with me who are perfectionists, people pleaser, overthinkers. A lot of people who work with me are just like too smart for their therapists, but oftentimes have a lot of emotional resistances to being able to be emotionally intelligent. So they're not really in tune with their emotions. They're suppressing. They don't really feel safe to express emotions. So a lot of their overthinking, their perfectionism is really from suppression. So they don't feel like they're worthy of being seen or heard. Now, if we're working together, then part of what we want to do is really see where and the roots of how these things came to be. So one of the things we're looking at is our 4 wounds that you've heard me say many times on this podcast. Our guilt wound, our abandonment wound, our neglect wound, our trust wound. All of these wounds are pretty common. So when you're working with somebody who is supporting you through whatever goal or dream you have, to heal through, like whatever it is that you think you are healing through. Your facilitator, practitioner, your mentor, whatever label they have, whoever it is that you've gone to, ideally they would have information and knowledge about how to decipher this for you so that they can get to the core and the roots of the action, the behaviors, the thoughts, rather than just throwing spaghetti at the wall again, right? So you do want to be intentional about who you're working with, why you're working with them, what do you believe you're going to get from working with them? Do they have evidence of success of working with people who are in similar positions like you? Do they have a structured methodology that they're working with that allows them to be very intentional with you? Or are they throwing spaghetti at the wall and kind of just using you as a guinea pig? And it's been a big conversation in the online space the last couple of years for coaches who get certifications but don't necessarily know how to work with the roots of a lot of the issues that they want to work with. So when you're doing your due diligence of working with a mentor, a facilitator, a practitioner, you want to make sure that you understand what their background is and if they have a history for giving you the results that you want to have when you're working with this person. So next is the fear of failure. Now, fear of failure shadow work is like really interesting because it's like maybe you're really committed, you know, you're just like, I'm gonna go, I'm consistent, I'm disciplined, I'm devoted, I'm doing all this stuff, you know what I mean? Like you're into it. But you know what? A lot of shadow work folks who have this fear of failure are perfectionists. So they worry that they're not going to do it right, or they won't see the results, or they want such like a strict blueprint. They're like, okay, well, where am I supposed to be after week 1? Where am I supposed to be after week 2? Where am I so I have to be week 3? So oftentimes you'll hear me, if you've ever come to any of my containers, I'm always talking about things being a self-exploration container, because yeah, we're doing some real fucking shit in 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, you know, period of time that we're working with. But there is not like, oh my gosh, you're gonna heal everything about yourself after 6 weeks. That would be such a weird fucking promise. So perfectionists and people who are overthinkers often need like, okay, after week 1 I'm gonna heal all my childhood, and week 2 I'm gonna heal all of this, and week 3 I'm gonna heal all of this. And it's like, that's just not how it goes, you know? And so part of this, I'll remind you that shadow work is not about perfection, it's about progress. And it's actually really about imperfection, being okay with your imperfection, and how to like yourself when you're imperfect and don't know what you're doing and don't know all the answers, and you don't, right? Like the only way not to fail is by starting. The only way not to fail is by starting. And the only way to fail is by not starting. So the fear of failure is often such this big kind of like, I always laugh about this. It's like, oh, you're going to wait another 2 years to start that? Because you're like, the pain of you being in this moment with all the things that you're wanting to heal, all the healable things that you want to heal, you think you need to wait till later to do because you feel like you're going to fail at doing them. Like, what a conundrum, but a very real worry for a lot of people who are, you know, navigating their way in shadow work. All right, so I've got 2 more for you. The second to last, number 9, is the fear of losing control. Ooh, trust issues, anybody? People pleasers, anybody? Perfectionists, anybody? So the reason that it happens, you know, this particular fear when it comes to doing shadow work is that people fear that their emotions will take over their lives. You know, it's like my feelings are going to take over, and I spend my entire life suppressing them, or I spend my entire life pretending I don't have feelings or emotions or needs or boundaries or this or that. And then all of a sudden, if I let myself feel one thing, it's going to take over my life. I'm going to lose my sense of stability, my grounding. I'm going to be like someone who cries, and I pride myself on somebody who doesn't cry, yada, 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 yada. Right? So the thing about it is that shadow work is about observing emotions. It is very much emotions heavy. It's emotional intelligence. It's emotional experience. It's emotional release. It's raising emotions to the body. Especially if you're ever working with me, I use a 4R protocol. I've made this protocol available on my podcast and YouTube channel if you ever want to watch or catch those. But it's about 4 R's: raising emotions, recognizing emotions, releasing emotions, and then regulating the nervous system. So shadow work is really about like raising shit to the surface. So a lot of it is going to come up. So it's not to say like, oh, you're going to get into this work and, you know, at 4 o'clock when you clock out, like the emotions are not going to come with you. They're going to come with you, my friend. They're going to come heavily with you. And the thing is that the shadow work is about allowing these things to be true, allowing emotions to raise to the surface, but not really being overconsumed by them. You're not letting them take over you. So tools like breath work and grounding and somatic and the movement and the energy sciences, all the beautiful things that you've heard me talk about this in this podcast for the last 4 years, is all about allowing the emotions not to consume you. So fear of losing control is when you're on the extreme of something, when you're an extremely, hyper emotional to the point where like you're not grounded, you're not feeling tethered to something, you're not feeling supported, you're not necessarily in your body, or you're on the completely opposite side where you're fully, numbed down, you're feeling so anxious, you're feeling the depressive feelings in your body, it's so heavy, it's bogged down, there's kind of this heaviness to that. All of these things are extremes. Now, when you're doing shadow work, you might go to one of the extreme for a brief moment. But when you're working with a facilitator and a practitioner or a mentor who knows how to navigate that, they're not just dropping you off at the excess of emotion. They're not just dropping you off to the point where you're numbed. They're not overworking you to the point where you don't know how to, navigate your day to day and just be able to like move through life, right? Until the next week when you see them. That's not what's happening, right? So shadow work is not just this like constant, consistent, like being bogged down and like hitting you over the head where you don't have the agency and the autonomy to decide what pace you're going, or, what kind of rest you're going to take, if you're going to take a week off, if you're going to, pace out your time in a different way than you thought you needed to. So part of it is also understanding, like, I keep saying, healing at the pace of your nervous system, but also, you're not like hourly doing this every single day. You know what I mean? It's not like 9 to 5, you're shadow work. It's like, no, you're doing this like once a week. You know what I mean? And if you're really about it, like twice a week, sometimes it's like that. So you might have a different pace, but you're not going to lose control because you still have life to live. You still have other things that you have at your disposal, like breathwork techniques and grounding and tapping and journaling and so many beautiful other tools that are supportive of this, shadow investigation. So let me get to this last fear, which is the fear of being alone in the process. Fear of being alone. Yeah. And I think, I mentioned this briefly when we were talking about losing your identity or losing relationships or changing relationships. All of these things kind of lead to this fear, and this fear is so common, and it's a commonly complained about fear as well. It's a commonly complained about thing while you're in shadow work as well, which is that I feel isolated. I feel like others don't understand my journey. I feel like my family doesn't get it. I'm the black sheep of the family. My friends do not understand. I feel like I don't have a safe space to even talk about this stuff that I'm learning. I feel like I'm being judged, or I feel I'm doing all of this by myself, right? The fear of being alone in the process is a really real fear, and it's a reality as well. It's not just like a made up fear. None of these fears that I mentioned are made up fears. I'm trying to point out to you like the fear, and then also, the other side of the fear as well. So this side of the fear is to say, yeah, you are going to be alone in the process, and even my purpose of having this podcast, my purpose of having created many of the things that I've created, the masterminds, the mentorships, the healing arts immersions, the programs, the decolonized breathwork facilitator training program, all of these different things is because I too felt very alone in the process of many of the things that I was investigating. And so when I'm thinking about, the importance of what's needed in shadow work, especially as somebody who's trying to navigate it all by yourself, you need community, you need support, you need other people, you need a mentor, you need to know that you can be guided in a way that is not somebody telling you what you need and what you need to do, and here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but guiding you in a way that provides you a safe container to explore, to connect, to integrate, to expand, to cry, to be vulnerable, to be seen, to do all the stuff that in our day-to-day work, a lot of us don't have these spaces to do that. Sometimes we have friend groups who can allow for us to have that. Sometimes we have family members and all of that. So it's not to say, oh, there's nowhere that you can, get this. But oftentimes this alone feeling, this alone isolating feeling is, it prevents you from actually really diving deeper into your shadow work, because you're just like, I'm going to lose my friends. I'm going to lose myself. I'm going to lose my identity. I'm going to lose. But think about all the things that you have to gain on the other side, right? It's demystifying the shadow work, and it helps you feel empowered at the end of the process if you're understanding what to expect at the beginning of the process. And all of the process of shadow work is you're going to go and have ebbs and flows. There's going to be maybe other fears that I didn't cover here, but as I think about it and as my experience allows me to see it, these are the most common fears. There's so much beauty in transmuting and alchemizing these fears to say, hey, I can actually create a pathway to my healing that is in alignment to where it is that I presently am in my journey. So if I'm like really ready to go ham, let me go find that facilitator who's like ready to hold space for me. And I'm one of these facilitators. It's like, you only come work with me when you're ready to go. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not dragging you over the finish line. I'm not dragging you and convincing you need to heal or not. Like, you made a decision. If you're ready, like, let's go. You know what I mean? And speaking of which, if you're ready to go, 6 weeks of shadow work is starting January 9th. We're doing 6 weeks of deep, integrative, mucky, fun, juicy, gooey, sexy shadow work. And if you're down to go heal your inner wounds, you want to go heal your abandonment, your trust, your guilt, your neglect, you want to look at some of your habits and behaviors and your patterns. And if you've been navigating any of these 10 fears that we talked about, come through. We've got the community, we have the support, we have the mentors, we have so many beautiful things happening in this incredible 6 weeks. And if you are interested to join me for 6 weeks, go ahead and hit the link in the show notes, or you can head to www.alwaysplay.org/shadow-work. And also the link is in the show notes, so you can click onto it directly. And I'd love to know what it is that you took away from this episode. Go ahead and screenshot this episode and tag me on Instagram at shanila.satar. And let me know what you loved about the episode, if you're dealing with any of these fears, and give me a little, hello, a little wave. And just remember, the world is your playground. And until next time, I will catch you soon.